So I had a download this week. Really struck me. Wanted to talk to you guys about it. And it had to do with what an awakened world would look like. We have a vision here of a loving, thriving, transformational world. That's an awakened world. What would that actually look like? How do we actually get there? I mean, that's the thing. How do we get there? Well, we teach here principles, practices that can support that, which is why signing up for Ash's class is a really good idea. And I just have been looking at this so deeply this week in terms of what it means for us to walk around because in this state of awakened. Because of course, to have a loving, thriving, transformational world, we have to be loving, thriving, transformational beings. We have to be that as often as we can. We have, in our teaching, I know I've gone through this with you before, but I'm going to do it again, the 4 kingdoms of consciousness that we talk about here. And the first is to me, where you just at life is just doing it to you. You can't do nothing about it. You feel kind of hopeless. Life's bringing you down because all these things are happening to you. The second kingdom of consciousness is by me. By me is where you make a stand against to me. It's the other side of the coin. Now you empower yourself to rise above that which is happening to you. So it's still in reaction to you, to me, right? It's still that feeling victimized, except now you don't feel, you're taking charge. And this is the spot at which when I speak to people, a lot of times they say, well, it's just the other side of the coin. You're still a victim here. And they'll go, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. And so maybe you feel that way. Maybe you feel, I'm not a victim because I'm empowered and I'm taking this on. But if what you're taking on is just go to rise above that which you felt victimized by, then you're still feeling victimized. You're just doing it better. And better is better, just so we're clear. Better is better. The next kingdom we talk about around here is through me. And I find that through me is where, throughout our movement, we have a lot of folks who are in that through me state, and this was the big download this week, was that through me is still a victimized state. Except how you're handling it is using this greater power that sometimes you get a handle on and sometimes you don't. And thus, it's out of your control. Our founder, Ernest Holmes, says, there's a power in the universe for good, and you can use it. Well, if it's there's power for good in the universe, and it's out there, and you can use it, then it's all about, well, how do I use it? How do I get in there? How am I with this? And thus, you're kind of at a victim then of how good you are at using it. And what I realized this week was it's easy to fall into that place. Because so much of the time, and maybe I'm the only one who does this, we think about power as control. Well, there must be something out there greater than me because I don't have control over everything that's happening. And thus you are at the mercy of that. And it's more subtle. I think what happens as we move along in our spiritual growth is the victimization that we deal with, it gets subtler. Ash spoke about this last week. She said that, we can take care of what we're aware of. It's what we're not aware of. And what we're dealing with here is something so deep in our psyche. We have been talking about a other power for 100,000 years. In the beginning, it was everything. Everything was a god, was a spirit, was a power, whether it was the tree or the animals or the sky or the lightning. It was all these gods. We come forward a little more and we get a little bit more arrogant, and all of a sudden all these gods take human form. They're the same gods, but now they're in human form. If you've ever read any of Homer, the Iliad or the Odyssey, it may sound like he's talking about, how all these heroes, Achilles and Helen of Troy and folks like that. But what he's really talking about, if you've read it, is the gods that came into play, and they're the ones who actually controlled who'd win a battle. They controlled whether Achilles was strong or not. They controlled everything. It was very much about being at the mercy of these gods that now were in human form. Come forward even more, 6,000 years ago, there were some guys who said, you know what, there's only one God. And he's a very vengeful dude who, if you don't do what he says and follow these commandments, he's going to smite you. Ooh. You could be smited. Well, then there were all these folks who followed the commandments, and their lives weren't working anyway. And so then this dude comes along about 2,000 years ago and says, you know what? He's not that kind of dude who'll smite you. He's actually a loving father type. And all you got to do is be loving, and your life will work out just fine. And people were like, okay, I'm going to try that. But then when it wasn't working, some folks who they called themselves priests came along and said, well, it's really not about this world, it's about the next one. And if you do what we tell you to do, you'll go to heaven, and if you don't, you go to hell. But that's in the next life, whatever happens here. And so then the people were at the mercy of that. You see how it's all in there. I mean, and there's a way in which, because I know I've told you this story, but I love this story, so I'm going to tell you again. When I was in Asheville, and I was the music director, I was auditioning drummers, and this one drummer came in and asked us what we, believe here. And I said, we believe that we are responsible for the creation of our lives. And he said, put out his, no way am I taking responsibility for my life, and ran out of there. Right? So there's a way in which this whole idea of victim, some of us deep inside actually like that. We don't want to be responsible. We don't want to be responsible. How could we take responsibility for everything that happens in my life? Come on. That's crazy talk. There's got to be this power that's overseeing everything that maybe we can check into once in a while. Got to be, because I'm not responsible for what's happening out there. But then you don't get to be fully in charge of yourself. Then you don't get to experience the magnificence that's actually possible. You get tastes. When we're in a through me state, what I got this week is That's a way to get tastes of what's truly possible in this world. And what you really want, or let me put this differently, what I really want is more than just a taste. You get to decide that for yourself. But as an as-me consciousness, which is that fourth kingdom of consciousness, you are in charge of your life and everything that happens in it. That's why we have the saying, what you embody manifests. What you embody totally. And why what Ash said last week about what we don't know is still running our lives becomes so important. Because we're expressing, we're creating, we're having an experience in life that has a lot to do with what we don't even know we're thinking about until we do. Until we're willing to do that inquiry, to lift it up, to have more before us. And I know a lot of people, I've spoken to a lot of people who are very uncomfortable with the idea that there is not some power out there, but it's here. You know, they got to call it something. There's an intelligence in the universe. What are we calling it? What are we doing with it? I don't know, but when we take it here, when we say, okay, this is me, this is who I get to be, and I am creating my life. And every time I do that, something miraculous happens. Not just sometimes. We get to feel this miraculousness in our life. Something special occurs when we truly reach that place of, it's me. I am responsible for the creation of my life. Mother Teresa said, I just learned this recently, and this is now one of my favorite quotes. I used to have 3 favorite quotes, now I have 4. And Mother Teresa said, I used to think that prayer changed things, but now I know that prayer changes me, and I change things. I used to think that prayer changes things, but now I know that prayer changes me, and I change things. That's why you get into foundations class. That's why you get into any class you can, so it can change you. A lot of us, including me, showed up at a Science of Mind Center, showed up at a Center for Spiritual Living because we wanted to change things out there. You know, maybe we didn't have enough money. Maybe our health was bad. Maybe our relationships were in the toilet. And we thought if we come here and we start praying for those things, they would shift. And to an extent, they actually do, right? You get an experience of, wow, things actually do get a little better out there when you start praying for things. But if you want real change, if you really want to take it on in a way that makes your life miraculous, then you got to change. You got to change. And what we teach here will do it. So that you change. So that you grow. So that you become something different. I talk a lot about when I was in the hospital last year. Before I talk about that, I want to say that for the past 25 years that I've been involved in this teaching, I have noticed that if I take on, it is when I've gotten sick or a cold, flu, any kind of virus, if I take on that I am the creator of this, I am source, I'm the one who actually gets to shift this. Not some power out there, but me in this, as the powerful, creative, spiritual being I am. I used to get sick way more often, right, than I do now. Way more. And so so what I want to tell you about this is by taking on ourselves as source, you have the opportunity to have shifts in your body, in your world, in what's going on in your relationships that you never had before. If you don't do that, there's a 100% chance you won't get those shifts. Right? So it does, because not every time. I did wind up in the hospital last year. Not every time does it work, but when I was in the hospital, I finally got clear. At the moment the doctor said, "You're not seeing tomorrow," I got very, very clear on who actually gets to decide that. What source really is. It was quite a moment when the doctor is sitting in front of you saying, "This is your last day on earth." And so in that moment, when I decided I had say, that this was me as source, and they said, the problem is you're not taking in enough air. That you're at 65% and at 60% you're dead. And you've been dropping all day. And I said, oh, the problem's air. Okay. I could deal with that. And so I went into my lungs and started working with breathing, since that was the issue. And as I'm doing this, and this was all through the night, I would get to a place inside myself where, okay, I'm breathing a little better. And every time I recognized that, the respirator lady came in and said, "You're breathing better. You're now up to 70. You're now up to 75. Every single time I said, okay, I've reached another plateau. I'm breathing better. She comes in and says, "You're breathing better." Got it right then and there. It was like immediate. It was an extraordinary thing. Now, here's the part that is even more extraordinary to me. Pregnant pause. Since then, I have all these moments where I forget that I'm source. Here I was, about to die, got very clear in that moment, had that kind of experience, and then on a day-to-day basis, I forget maybe 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 times a day. I got to keep reminding myself. And I think, well, if you haven't had that kind of experience, how are you reminding yourself? What are you using to get back on track? It's harder for anybody who hasn't gone through that than has, I would imagine. And so, in what I'm speaking to today, I want you to be gentle with yourself. This isn't something that just happens and that's it. Right? So I notice this process that happens to me when something pisses me off. The first step is because I'm upset, I'm into me. The next thing that happens is I usually argue. Now I'm in by me. The next thing that happens is I surrender. Now I'm in through me. And then finally, I remember I'm source. So this is the practice that can bring us to an awakened state in each of us. It doesn't matter, Dr. Barbara Waterhouse used to say this all the time, it's not about what you do first, it's what you do second, right? If what you do second is beat yourself up for what you did first, you are still not a loving, thriving, transformational being. If you think if you're getting on your case for not having done it, the past couple of times, you are not even getting closer. To be a loving, thriving, transformational being, you have to be good to yourself. Like she was talking about last week, self-love. Right? When we are in an awakened state, when we get there, when we have that, when it is ours, when we awaken to that which is biggest and strongest inside us, which is most beautiful, the side effects are compassion, kindness, love, and an overflowing of wanting to do service. You don't have to think about it. It just comes naturally. So if we want to transform the planet, we have to be willing to step into that really uncomfortable place of, I'm the one in charge. That doesn't mean you're in control. I did not get to control the situation of winding up in the hospital that turned out to be this incredible blessing that allowed me to experience what it is to be Source. Now, I've had lots of experiences where I've noticed myself as Source. I'm clearly a slow learner. Maybe I'm not the only one. It's okay. Right? I read Zen stories every morning, and the average Zen master is in their 80s. That's when they finally achieved it. They're in their 80s when they finally achieve a place of mastery. This is not something that comes quickly or easily, but it is possible. We have people in the world who have shown us the possibility of what it is to be in an awakened state. If you want to be completely out of victimization, you have to let go of what's happening outside yourself. People like Anantakrante, who was in prison, beaten every day, forced to work until she dropped. And in that, found such a high level of joy, compassion, and love that she realized she was freer than the guards. Her situation didn't change. She was still in jail. Paul Gyatso, who got tortured by the Chinese for 33 years. I know I mention these folks a lot, but we need this reminder, right? We need the reminder that whatever it is we're dealing with in the world, whatever it is we're dealing with, if we're concerned about who wins the U.S. election, we are being victimized by that, and we are not creating the world we want to create. When we are concerned about what's happening out here, we are not taking care of the practice that would actually change something. A loving, thriving, transformational world. That world does not occur unless we become loving, thriving, transformational beings. You see how this works? We got to be that. The more we be that, the more we reach that place of awakenedness, then when we're being of service, like Mother Teresa spoke about, it's from that place of awakening. She was so lighthearted in her giving. She never got angry about what didn't work. She never concerned herself with what wasn't happening. She was awakened to the fact that it was what was hers to do was hers to do. The more we awaken, we get so clear on what's ours to do in this changing world, in the world that can become awakened. We have that. We have the ability to do that, each and every one of us, within us, all of us, together, independently, all of us have this ability to awaken. And there is nothing greater we can do for the planet. There is no amount of service we can do that would be greater than your awakening. So I invite you to focus there. A loving, thriving, transformational being. Be that. And you have done more for the planet than lots of folks who are spinning their wheels trying to fix something When transformation does not rectify, it transmutes. Transformation does not rectify, it transmutes. Transformation does not rectify, it transmutes. As long as we're trying to rectify, we are not awakening. They're not the same thing. I used to think that prayer changed things. Now I know it changes me. Now I know it changes you. And then we can change things. Thank you. I love you.